Welcome to episode 4 of the Ace Trainer podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about the Louisville regionals that just happened, talk about the tournament structure, the meta game, and what we think is going to happen moving forward. Gabe, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Just got back from Louisville late last night. I'm not going to Lille, which is going to be this week. However, we'll be going to Poland. So we're going to start to test for that. And yeah,
And good. You're hot off a good finish, I believe.
Yes, I ended up getting 7th place at Louisville. Started 0-1. I played against a Lugia round 1, and I drew completely terribly, and I was like, this is going to be a very long tournament. Was not feeling very confident after that first round, and then, everything kind of started to fall my way. I had some, pretty good matchups, drew, like relatively well, and I went into day 2 at 7-1, and then I won out, went 3-0-1 in day 2, and yeah, made it into top 8. I played the same 60 with you. Dragapult was the choice. Definitely one of the hardest decks I've ever played. Definitely taught me a lot. There were some situations, like during the tournament, where I wasn't even like 100% positive, like what was the right play, just because there were so many options. So I think playing one of those decks where you can just do so many things was definitely one of the most enjoyable experiences I've had. It's definitely one of the most fun decks. But yeah, very difficult to play for sure. But yeah, super happy with my top 8 performance.
Yeah, you texted me after round 1. You're like, our deck has consistency issues. And I'm like, bro, come on.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is over. This is gonna be a long tournament, because I would say like the one change is that like a lot of lists played, I believe, 4 Dragapult or 4 Ultra Ball. I know that Tord's list was one of them. I think that decided to do that, and our list only played 3 Ultra Ball, 3 Dragapult, which I was kind of sus on. I was like, okay, I don't know if this is enough. And then after round 1, games 1 and 3, I just completely bricked, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a problem. But actually, I think the consistency was totally fine. We ended up going with 4th Buddy Puffin, and that card was absolutely huge. There were some turns where I was like, if this was an Ultra Ball, I probably would not be winning here. So I think just like the flexibility, that card, kind of gave was just, huge overall. So yeah, I can't complain for sure.
Yeah, the card's the best ball search on turn 1, right? It gets you Fan Rotom. You don't actually need Terapagos on turn 1. You definitely need Fan Rotom. And then on turn 2 or even turn 3, it's amazing for just filling your board with extra Hoot Hoots, extra Duskulls, right? So yeah, 4 Puffin was super sick. My run, not very good. I went 3-3. I got double donked by Petront Poison, which we talked about last week, and I said was not very good.
Broken deck?
So that's awkward. Yeah, broken deck, I guess. I actually don't even know if my opponent Austin made day 2. I hope he did, but I'm not too sure. Otherwise, one other thing that happened to me, and I think this happened to you as well, is I prized both my Fan Rotoms in one of my games.
Yeah.
And that was like really bad.
Game 3 at top 8. I went Buddy Puffin. Oh, there's no Fan Rotoms here. I guess I'm not functioning, but yeah, it's not fun.
Yo, at least you went Buddy Puffin, man. I went Nest Ball, and I was like, oh, that's bad. And then I got 1 Hoot Hoot, and then my Hoot Hoot died, and the game was over. So yeah, maybe you could play 3 Fan Rotoms. I don't know. That seems like kind of ridiculous. Just deal with it when it happens, right?
Yeah, the only code would be Manaphy, I think. I think that's like the only thing they could probably cut, because the list felt like really, really tight. So like you could play 3rd Fan Rotom, but then without Manaphy, you're kind of tanking your Regidrago matchup even more. And just there's like a couple situations. I mean, we saw that Palkia did relatively well too. So I think that Manaphy was definitely nice. But I think that 2 Fan Rotom is fine. There was only one game that I kind of ran into a problem with. It's actually kind of the same thing as playing like 2 Gardevoir EX, right? Like if you prize, like no one's really trying to play 3 Gardevoir EX for that exact situation. Same thing, kind of applies with this, right? So I don't think there's a reason to play 3. I don't think you need it.
Yeah, kind of on this idea of prizing, how did you find the 1/1 Pidgeot was?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think with Colress's tenacity, it's okay, because I feel like Pidgeot so much of the time is just there to find your energies. So I think that if I ever went up to a 2/2 line, you'd probably have to cut the Colress, which I think is like maybe okay. But I felt the 1/1 was fine. There was a couple games where I was like, dang, like I really wish I had the Pidgeot. But things like Phasandipity, like you just see still like so many cards. And I think Colress, kind of, smooths out those games where you don't actually have the Pidgeot. I think I prized one of the pieces maybe 15% of my games at most. I vividly remember a couple games where I might prize it, but I didn't really necessarily lose many rounds. I think in game 3 of top 8, that was the one time where I believe I prized my Pidgey, which was, really, really annoying because I got Pidgeot out on, I think, the second to last like turn of the game, where like if I had that card out for like an extra like turn or two, I probably would have, like had enough because I was one card short on the final turn of the game. So if I felt like if I had the Pidgeot out like a little bit earlier, then I probably would have had some of the resources like to be able to get there. But there really wasn't a whole lot of times where like I felt like I needed it, because when you play the 2/2 Pidgeot and you don't prize any of the pieces, it kind of feels bad. Just because there's, I guess, just like extra stuff in the deck that you don't actually need. So I'm still okay with the 1/1 for sure. Maybe go up to 2/1, but I think 1/1's fine, especially with Fez.
Yeah, I think the Chorus definitely smooths it over. If you don't play Chorus, you definitely need a 2/2 Pidgeot, or like maybe 2/1 Pidgeot with no Chorus. I don't know. I guess you could cut like Manaphy and Chorus for a Pidgey and a Pidgeot. That seemes
That would be the
kind
cut
of
I would make.
Yeah. Anything else that happened in your tournament run? Mine was pretty boring, honestly, but did you have any other interesting games or cool situations come up?
Yeah, I would say the craziest game, I played against a Turbo Friggorath deck, and I almost lost to that. So Friggorath has an ability.
Damage that.
You cannot damage the Friggorath. However, there's a very important thing about that card. It has 260 HP, which means that 2 Dusknoirs KO it, thankfully. And I figured out, I can attack with Pidgeot as well. So that was definitely one of the most crazy games I played. I think I was like 1-1 or 2-1 at the time. So it was, pretty cool to, play against that deck. That was definitely like the big surprise. And it does pretty good against things like Raging Bolt. And I guess the Trapagos matchup is pretty close because we actually had a really close set as well. So like that was interesting for sure to play against. I don't think there was really anything else that was like, I guess that kind of like stands out. Oh, I guess the one thing is I didn't play against any Charizards this entire tournament. I played against like one Drago, I think 1 or 2 Terapagos. I played against a couple Palkias, but I never played against a Charizard. And Charizard was a deck that did relatively well at the tournament. One getting top 4 in Sebastian. So yeah, that was like the one like major matchup that I never actually got a chance to play against. I think the matchup is relatively close personally. But yeah, that was one I never got to play against, which I guess I'm okay with because that matchup can get really scary really quickly. But yeah.
Yeah, I think the matchup's okay. Not good. I'd rather definitely see a Raging Bolt or something. Charizard also wasn't on the day 1 graphic. I don't know how much of the meta share it made up, but it was less than, I think Palkia was number 6 at like 7.5%. So there wasn't a lot of Charizard in day 1. There was a decent amount in day 2. So I guess Charizard players had a good event. One other thing that I want to talk about before we even get into the metagame is the tournament structure. A lot of people online are upset, especially everyone who went X2, because there were 10 players who went 10-2, and none of them made the top 8. Kind of crazy that you can go into day 2 at 6-2, and then you can't actually make cut. What do you think of that?
Yeah, so I think that there's a problem with the system. So this apparently is actually like true Swiss. I think the version that we were using in the past was considered like modified Swiss, but the problem with this system is that we had, I think, in 1,940 or like 1,950 players, which is just short of the 9-round day 1, 4-round day 2 threshold. So I think that we're going to run into a problem where like we hit like 1,900 players. We're going to kind of run into this problem every single time where like we barely miss the threshold, and there's just kind of like an overflow of people who can go 4-0 on the second day of day 2 and not even get to play an asymmetrical. And I think that's a problem. I think that people want to play more Pokemon, like most of the players, sign up, just to play Pokemon. And I think that that's, kind of an issue because they've, taken, I think 2 rounds off, right? So that's kind of a problem. But the crazy thing that happened was if one of the 9-1-1 tables tied, because I think there were 4 or 5 tables that were playing at the record of like 9-1-1 or better. And if any of them tied, that would have meant 8th seed would have been 10-2. Which meant if one of them gets in, all the 10-2s get a shot. And that would have created a situation where from seed 8 through 17 would have been people at 10-2, which then means that I think 17 and 16 have to play for one. And then I believe all the other ones, then play after that, 16, I think all the way up through 1, right? Which would have meant that I personally think it's ridiculous that if you get 1st or 2nd seed, you can win pretty much all of your rounds and you have to play asymmetrical that seems ridiculous. Like like that Gedimer, I think, started 10-0 at the tournaments. I think it's kind of crazy that he was in a position where there was a pretty good chance he was going to have to play, and I don't think that's fair. Because I think if that have that exceptional of a run, you deserve, to make it in the top 8. So the fact that you would have to play kind of seems off. So like there's, definitely multiple problems. I've never seen so many people complaining about, something specific about Pokemon. Because like I checked out on social media, it seemed like every top player was just saying, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. It's kind of all seemed like a universal thing. And I think that the system is a little bit toxic right now for sure. But hopefully this isn't a problem like moving forward. Like hopefully like they make a change. I think the fix would probably just be adding like an extra round. I think that's probably the best thing that you can do, to fix this, which is, what the modified Swiss was. So, that kind of, starts to beg the question of why did we change in the first place? So, yeah.
Yeah. I have a bit of a hot take on this, actually. Initially, I had the same reaction as you, where I'm like, hey, it's stupid that you make day 2 and you can't make top 8. But the more I thought of it, like, I actually have no problem with people coming in at 6-2 and not being able to make top 8. I think the only reason that everyone is so upset is because we all assumed and believed that because you make day 2, you have a chance at top 8, but Pokemon has never like said that. That's never actually been like a reason behind the tournament structure. I think there's nothing wrong with making day 2 and just being able to play for top 16. But I do wish that the ASIM was different. Like you were saying, I wish that the only people who played in ASIM were the people with the same record as 8th place, right? So like in this case, everyone who was 10-1-1, or like say like 8th seed was 10-2, everyone who's 10-1-1 makes top 8, and then the 10-2s can play for 8th seed. The problem with that is if you have like a 10-person, way too many rounds, right? If you have like a 10-person bracket, and Pokemon wants to close the venue and get everyone out, so there's no way that would ever happen. And then one other idea that I would like to see is I'd like to see top or like first seed or the higher seed in every top cut match get to choose to go first or second. I think that would provide like a little bit of a reason and reward for actually going like EXO, like Gedimer did.
Yeah,
in the first 10 rounds.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that. And I guess actually like one of the things that I think is hard for people is that like when you look back at like previous tournaments, for example, Andrew Hedrick started 6-2-1 at NAIC and went 5-0-1 in the top 8. So if he was playing in like the system like right now, he wouldn't have a chance. And I think that's, kind of the thing is that there have been multiple times where players have gone in at, like that 6-2 or like that 6-2-1 record and, like they've, pretty much ran the gauntlet. I think there was a regional where I went in at 6-2-1 and I had to win out, make top 8. And, if that tournament was in like this exact structure, I would not have had the opportunity. So I think that there's definitely like both sides. Like I definitely see your perspective. I think the biggest thing is that people weren't ready for this drastic of a change. I think that, we're kind of going through the growing pains of it and says, okay, this is truly a different system. And I think that that's probably a reason as to why, so many people are, kind of complaining about it because we've never seen this system. Like, I don't think that we've, ever played in a system like this. I think VGC might have in the past, but, for TCG, I mean, we've been dealing with, the modified Swiss for the past like 10 to 12 years. So I think that like the change to this was, definitely kind of a shock for some people.
Yeah, definitely a shock. I think the system's still fair, right? Like you're saying how you can go 6-2-1 and run the gauntlet, and those people don't get a chance to make it now. The people who do start 10-1-1, they might have lost. Like say we were playing like the 15 round structure, those people who start 10-1-1, in this case you might have lost and then not made top 8, right? So
yeah, which I was like, it's gonna be so bad if that happened. I'd have been so mad.
Yeah. So I think it's just giving different people different opportunities. This system rewards people who start good. The other system rewarded people who maybe were able to kind of make a comeback. I think it's all fair, and
we just need to get used to it.
Yeah, everyone just needs to get used to it, I think. It definitely, like if I went 10-2 and I didn't make top 8, I probably would be super upset right now. So I guess I can't fault the people for being upset, but I think we all have to just get used to it. And I don't think Pokemon is going to change it, no matter how much we complain.
Yeah, I think the big thing is that they probably won't make drastic change right now because they've already had, like a couple tournaments under the structure. So I don't really know if they want to like instantly change it. Maybe for like integrity of like
The
for
season.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
I think maybe they change it next year, but Pokemon's typically very conservative on the decisions, like that like they choose to make. And I think this is a situation where I would be absolutely shocked if they actually changed it back. I don't expect
Yeah,
that to
me
happen.
too.
I think the easiest thing like for them to do would just be to like add an extra round. I think that would probably fix like a lot of the
Yeah.
problems. But then again, I also don't know how many tournaments, we're going to run into this, simply because of the fact that I think this event was probably going to hit, 2048, but I know there was like a hurricane, like that probably like caused a lot of people like not to go. And I think that a lot of the other tournaments are probably going to be in the 1700 like to like 1800ish, which I assume like with those like numbers we won't really like run into this problem. And then like if we get the ninth round, which is I think 2048 or more, we probably won't really run into this issue as well. So I think this was just kind of an event where everything kind of went wrong. So yeah.
Yeah, just like the perfect awkward number of people playing.
Yeah. And I guess like this, also kind of begs the question. I think you made a tweet about it about, now are gentlemen's agreements as like strong anymore? Because,
Mhm.
like if you're, six, I don't know, like 6-1, let's just say, taking a tie, I'm gonna go to 6-1-1 would actually be, probably fine. Because the only people that like made it into top 8 were people that won, I believe, like 10-1-1, I think. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's like a big thing as well, are like those gonna kind of start to fall apart now simply because taking a tie based off like the structure that we saw like for this event was actually totally fine. That's another question.
Mhm. I think people have to start paying attention to the number of people attending.
Yeah.
If we hit that awkward kind of 1900 threshold, well, maybe your tie is not so bad. Whereas, like, if we hit that ninth round, or we're like 1600, 1700 players, okay, now your tie is probably worthless. Um, and people just need to pay attention to the changing dynamic of what record will make top 8.
Yeah. I guess the question is that like a healthy thing? Is like how you, kind of approach Pokemon and like how like you prepare for tournaments, should that be based off how many people are attending? And I think that's kind of another
Yeah.
interesting thing. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Definitely makes it a little more like dynamic and almost like kind of random. Like if it's 1800 players, 1850, am I valuing a tie? Am I not valuing a tie? And it's
Does it
just
change
kind
your
of
deck decision?
yeah, it's hard to predict. So I probably don't like that. I wish it was constant, um, but it's not. Anyways, uh, that's pretty good for tournament structure. As far as metagame goes, we saw Raging Bolt win the event, which is kind of crazy. We also saw it perform relatively well beyond just winning the event with like a decent day 2 conversion and good placements in day 2. And usually we see Raging Bolt fall off. I think I remember in Dortmund. I actually don't remember the stat, but I remember it being horrible. None of them made top 8. Bunch of people played it day 1, and it just didn't convert. What do you think changed? Why do you think Raging Bolt is now all of a sudden converting well and winning events?
Yeah, so I think that Baltimore was probably the most extreme one, where I think that it was the most played deck, and the deck just did like absolutely terrible. I think that heading to Dortmund, I think one made top 8, but still like the amount of players that played it, still the deck didn't see like a whole lot of success, right? And then like this event, we saw I believe Xander Pero got I believe 10th or 11th place with Bolt with I believe 4 Bravery Charm, and then we saw Caleb win the tournament with 3 Bravery Charm. And I think that the Bravery Charm was probably the biggest thing that changed the deck. I think that, some of your matchups, for example, like Terapagos are just, so bad without the Bravery Charm. So I think if you play 3 to 4, you definitely have a very realistic shot at, seeing success in that matchup. I think that was, probably the biggest thing. I think another thing as well is that Regidrago still kept a pretty good presence in the format. I think it was sitting around 8 or 9%, and that's one of Raging Bolt's, strongest matchups. I think with 4 Charm, you probably just, completely destroy them as well. I don't think they can really, beat that amount of Bravery Charm. So I think that was like another thing is that Regidrago, like definitely still saw, like a pretty decent amount of play. It seemed like Zard also went down, and I think that Pult, kind of like took up a larger percentage,
Yep, it
of
did.
the Pidgeot variants. So I think that it was kind of just a perfect storm where people kind of, I think, wrote the deck off. I definitely was someone who was like, why would you play Bolt? The deck, can't beat these specific matchups. But then we saw like a list that actually, makes a lot of sense. So I definitely think the deck is back. I think the Bravery Charms, change a lot of it. And I think the metagame was just, perfect for it.
And we also saw a couple of good players playing the deck, right? And generally, whatever decks the best players decide to play are going to be some of the best performing decks, right? So I think that maybe contributed to it as well. I was definitely surprised to see Bolt do so well.
Yeah. I saw Caleb at 10-0. I was like, wait, he's playing Raging Bolt? I was like, this is crazy.
What?
I was like, this is crazy. But yeah, I mean, I think that a deck that takes a bunch of 50-50s, like if you give it, to a very successful player, like they are going to see success. Yeah. So Bolt's good, I guess, but it's still I'm curious to see how the format is going to adapt because it does take some pretty rough matchups to like certain decks. I think if you like Terapagos adds in, something like a Lost Vacuum, I think that matchup, becomes, significantly worse. I think maybe if like Regidrago like goes back to playing something like the Jamming Tower for it, that matchup, becomes like definitely a little bit, closer as well. So I'm curious to see if people, really want to tech for the deck because the deck is, something that I think is relatively easy to learn the basics of, which means, like a lot of casual players or players who don't really have a whole lot of time to test, like they're just going to send bolts. So I think that if you have the top players, that are respecting it, and you also have, that, base of, players who like might not, I guess, get to be able to play as much Pokemon, I think that, the play rate is going to spike. So like heading into like upcoming tournaments, I would not be surprised if Bolt was sitting as the most played deck again.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised either. I would be surprised to see it continue to perform well, though. I think people will kind of give it a bit more respect now.
Yeah, because everyone was clowning on the deck before this event, it seemed like, myself included. I was like, I don't know why we play Bolt. I was clearly wrong, but yeah.
I think I had it at like number 7 maybe on my top 10 decks list. So
I think I had it at 5.
Definitely, 5. Another deck that kind of capitalized on this, a lot of your friends from DDG played Lost Box. I think you might have a bit more insight into this than me. What do you think contributed so much to Lost Box's success this weekend? We saw Michael Davidson get second. Nathan Ginsburg got 17th.
Yeah, so I think the big thing like that kind of contributed to it was one, people really aren't playing Manaphy and Jirachi very more. I know that like some people are playing Manaphy, but it seems like the majority of Charizard lists are like choosing not to play that card. Like Dragapult is also the same way. Regidrago is also the not the most played deck in the format anymore. I think around Worlds, like Regidrago was sitting around 13 to 15% of the format, and now that Raging Bolt has seen a lot more success, I think that is kind of causing the deck like to lose a lot of steam. Like Lugia V-Star as well. It seems like Regidrago's definitely losing a lot of play rate. So it kind of created like this perfect storm where like no one's playing Manaphy, no one's playing Jirachi. Like Regidrago's only seen 7 to 8%. And I think that's like the major reason as to why. I think that the deck takes relatively decent matchups against like a lot of decks in the format. I think if your Zard opponent, if like they don't play Manaphy, I think you're pretty favored against them. I think like your Dragapult matchup, you just kind of like overrun them, and they also don't really have a great out to something like the Blood Moon or Saluna. Like Terapagos is the same way. I think the majority of Terapagos lists don't really play the Bouffalant, so that means that Blood Moon just kind of runs them over as well. So I think that what they like basically did was they said we are going to take a pretty much 90-10 matchup versus Regidrago, and I think they combined went, what was it, like 1-12 against Regidragos. They got completely destroyed by all the Regidragos that hit, but like Michael Davidson, like congrats to them, they dodged every Regidrago in the room. I don't think they played against like a single one. If that happens, your deck's matchup spread is absurd. So I definitely expected them to see success, but the problem is that it's kind of a major risk. Like for example, Andrew Hedrick, who was arguably probably the strongest Lost Box player overall, who piloted that list, they hit I think 2 or 3 Regidragos in the tournament, and there's just like nothing that you can do at that point. So that's kind of the risk, is you kind of start to play like the matchup roulette. I do fear that Lost Box is going to start to be teched out a little bit more. So for example, heading into Lille, which is this coming up week, if Lost Box sees success again, I think heading into LAIC, I think that there's definitely going to be a lot of people who are like, okay, we actually need to put in something like a Manaphy, or put in something like a Jirachi, maybe for the Terapagos variants, maybe playing something like the Bouffalants again. So I think that the deck is very easy to counter. It's just like this event, no one was really doing it, which is why I got second.
Yeah, and people willing to counter it as well. You got to tech for other decks as well. I played against Caleb Rogerson, and he destroyed me. We had a Manaphy in our Terapagos deck, and he still ripped apart my board with Sableye, used Ursaluna to kill my Terapagos, and it definitely felt like a rough matchup. One other deck I wanted to talk about is Lugia, and I feel like people don't talk about this deck enough. I think its success rate is actually pretty crazy, and its matchup spread is really good too. We saw Kieran and I think Yurko is how you say it. Both made top 8, and they've both made a couple top 8s now, right? Like, again, these top players playing Lugia seem to have very high success rates. We see Raul, he's got 2 top 8s with Lugia. I think, right? 2 top 8s, Baltimore,
2 top 8 and top 16 at Worlds.
And a top 16 at Worlds. Kieran, finals in Baltimore, top 8 here in Louisville. Yurko,
1 Joinville, I believe.
1 Joinville, yeah, 1 Joinville, top 8 here. And you're not really seeing any of these like multi top 8s from anyone else, I believe. So I guess what do you think of Lugia and what's contributing to its success?
I think the deck actually has a higher skill cap than, people give it credit for. I think, like the energy management is like the biggest thing that I think a lot of people, do, I would say, like slightly incorrectly. I think that it's the deck that, like when you sit down with it, you play it, and like if you set up as you're supposed to, your matchups are just insane. And I think that's like a really attractive thing to like a lot of players, because like there are like some decks in the format where you can set up pretty well, but you're still probably going to lose to some specific matchup, right? And I think that Lugia's, that's not really the case. I feel like if you get going as you're supposed to, your matchups pretty much across the board are pretty favorable. So I think overall it has one of the strongest, if the strongest matchup spread in the game when it gets set up. And I think that everyone kind of likes to talk about the deck being super high variance, but there's a reason as to why like the same group of players are consistently seeing success. You don't really see a whole lot of like Lugia players that you've never really heard of before see success. For example, someone like Rahul, like he's been seeing success for a very long time. Then like Yurko as well. I think Yurko's top 8 at a couple regionals. He won from the Joinville regional championships. I think like Kiaran as well has so many top 8 finishes as well. So it's all of like the top strongest like players in the world. They continue to play the deck, and I think that shows a lot about it for sure. So I definitely think it's going to be they're going to be strong like moving forward. I think its matchup spreads are pretty good against like the majority of decks, and I think it's a little bit harder to play than people give it credit for.
Yeah, I think its only bad matchups are, of course, Quad Thorns, which it can't beat, but people don't seem to be playing that. Miraidon, which I think is actually not even that bad of a matchup. If you don't get turn 1 amped, I think it's super winnable. And then Terapagos, which I think is just unfavored when Terapagos goes first. Like whoever goes first is just kind of favored in the Lugia Terapagos matchup. I think Terapagos is actually, like looking at the decks that perform well, is the only deck that has a favored matchup without being like a terrible deck.
Yeah,
right?
like Thorns, you kind of take like, yeah, sure, you beat Lugia, but your deck doesn't really have, I think, a whole lot of skill expression. You lose to a bunch of specific
random stuff,
just random things, like borderline theme decks like are just gonna farm you, right? And I think that like Terapagos is just a universally powerful deck that see success against it. I played against one Lugia in day 2, I believe it was around 9 or 10, and I didn't even set up like that exceptionally well, but I still won. So
yeah, and I think one other thing, and the last deck I really wanted to talk about, Control seeing so much success also contributes to Lugia's success, right? Because Lugia just kind of destroys control decks. We saw a couple Snorlax decks, a couple Pidgeot decks in the top 32. What do you think of this deck? These control decks, are they well positioned moving forward? What do you think contributed to their success at this event?
I honestly don't think that they're the most amazing decks in the world. I think that Terapagos is a pretty tough like matchup from just kind of like my experience. I feel like all the Dusknoir decks can kind of just like blow them off the board super quickly. I feel like the Lugia matchup as well is pretty bad, but Control is very good at capitalizing on people that don't necessarily know exactly like what they should be doing. I think that's a reason why like Stall and Control decks will probably like always see success. Is that they can definitely pick up a lot of free wins. I think that Stall, I know that Cal Connor lost their win into I think Kiaran. And that was like definitely a pretty close game from watching that. I think that Stall is probably overall the stronger variant, because they both kind of lose to Lugia, but I think Stall is like a little bit of a better chance against that matchup. And I think that Stall just takes some like insanely favored matchups to like specific decks in the formats. So I think that Stall is probably like a little bit better overall, but yeah, I think that like Pidgeot control is like still solid. It's a deck I personally haven't put like a whole lot of time into, so I'm definitely like not an expert on it, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not surprised to see it sees some play.
Yeah, I think Pidgeot kind of gets blown off the board by Dusknoir, like even harder. Um, the strength of Pidgeot control, it was really good in Charizard format, right? Because Charizard couldn't kill your Pidgeot. And there were a couple other decks that couldn't really kill your Pidgeot, and it really, I don't know, it really likes playing against decks that don't kill its Pidgeot. If you're playing against like Raging Bolt, Lugia, anything with a Dusknoir, yeah, I think that's about it. But that's like almost all the meta game, right? That's just gonna like blow up your Pidgeot at some point and play an Iono, and the deck doesn't really deal with that well. So I think that's why Snorlax sees a bit more success. Um, yeah, I'm actually really surprised by its success. Like almost all the decks I'm looking at here, like what do you actually beat? Like I guess Charizard, Dragapult, and like sometimes Bolt.
You can still
But
lose to Charizard because they have
yeah,
like
because they have
Dusknoir. I don't
Dusknoir.
think that matchup is like. I honestly don't know how the deck like continues to see success. It doesn't surprise me, but I feel like whenever I play against these decks, I feel like I have a pretty good shot, like just because I kind of know like what I should be doing against these matchups. And I think the big thing is like there are so many players who don't, test out, games, versus stall, and stuff like that. Like they just don't like put like a whole lot of games into, like playing against like the stall and control archetypes. And I think that's actually the biggest thing. The decks are very good at just like taking advantage because like I was looking at some like the Pidgeot control list, and I was like, I've never seen this card before, or like what does or like you like there's just like so many like random cards that don't like necessarily see like a whole lot of play. I think there was a Pidgeot control list a couple months ago that was playing like Great Tusk EX or something, and like I had absolutely like no idea what that card ever did, but apparently it's there to knock out like Shinchinos or something. I know that's some of the lists are now playing like the Diancie, I guess now.
Yeah, I see
But
that.
yeah, that was like one thing I was like, I don't know what's happening here, but yeah, it's just kind of just a bunch of cards, piled up into one deck with the Pidgeot line.
Yeah, yeah. Pidgeot, busted card. The rest of the deck, I don't know.
Yep, just throw the kitchen sink at them, everything. Just everything. Oh,
And hopefully they don't know what's happening.
literally, yeah.
Otherwise, I think that's kind of all I wanted to talk about as far as specific decks and metagame went. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Did I miss anything?
I guess the one thing probably that was worth kind of mentioning was Dragapult won Dortmund and then didn't see a whole lot of success here. And
mm,
I know that a lot of people were saying Dragapult's just a better Charizard. I personally don't think that's the case. I think that Zard is just like such like a powerful comeback deck. I feel like Zard is like the master of winning games that I feel like it shouldn't win. There are like so many games where like I'm like, dang, I don't think I'm gonna win this game, and then I just randomly win. And I feel like
yeah,
with Dragapult, that's not necessarily the case. I feel like your comeback potential is definitely a lot weaker for sure. So I think that seeing Charizard see success. I know that Sebastian got top 4. I believe Isaiah Chevelle got top 16 as well with it. So like there definitely were a decent group of solid players to see success. So I think that was like the one big thing. I personally think that Zard is probably the better Dusknoir deck, but I know that some people kind of have conflicting opinions on that.
yeah. If you want to watch a game where Charizard just like somehow wins, where it like definitely shouldn't, watch round 5 Louisville, Haruki Miwa versus Lucas Zing. It's a really good game. I was watching it earlier today, and there was some crazy combos coming off to get Haruki the win there. So I think we'll go ahead and move on. We put a post out on Twitter, as seems to be a bit of a tradition for our podcast, and asked what you guys wanted to hear us talk about. So I'm just going to get right into it. The first question I have here is from One Chance TCG, and they're asking, how do you go about finding a deck that fits your playstyle?
Okay, so this is like playstyle is a very controversial thing in the Pokemon TCG. Some people don't think, playstyle exists. I'm under the assumption that comfortability is everything. I think that I would never try and limit myself, like as a player to one specific type of archetype, but there are, just like some players that feel more, comfortable with like turbo decks, for example. Like I know like plenty of players that just like to play stall decks as well. So I think that what you're comfortable with is, definitely like the number one thing. I think that, we're kind of in a format as well, like right now where there's so many different viable decks. that I think that, testing out, like the majority of them, kind of just seeing like which one, resonates like with how you like to play the game the most, I think is probably like the most important thing. But that's like a really difficult question because some people don't think that play style exists. So yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, I don't think it exists in the way that people kind of think it exists. Okay, so I think like every tournament, there's objectively like a best deck to be playing. But I think that concept is so complicated, and it's such, yeah, that it's such a complicated thing to actually like calculate what the best deck was, that I think people can just kind of gravitate towards the decks they like to enjoy, they like playing, and still see success. So I think that's kind of where this idea of playstyle comes in, where it's like, okay, I'm looking at like 6 decks, they all seem pretty good. Well, I like playing stall decks. Let me play the stall deck. So I think that exists. As far as how to find a deck that fits your playstyle, I think it just comes from playing games, playing decks, right? Like if you play games with Snorlax and you love playing it, well, maybe you like stall decks, and then you can kind of just follow those cards as they come out, right? Like I used to love playing Zoroark GX, and then I saw Curlia, and I'm like, oh, this is sick. It's the same thing. let me just try this, see if it's any good, right? Or like, and then that's kind of led me to, I guess, a play style of just playing decks with broken draw engines, right? Decks like cards like Pidgeot, right? Charizard Pidgeot, that was something I loved. Gardevoir, right? Refinement, and then Shining Arcana, right? Just decks that draw a ton. Mew VMAX, right? So I think, yeah, just find whatever the first deck that you loved playing. That's probably like your play style in a way. Just keep looking for decks that are similar. Our next question from Mr. Burr has asked, how do you view Gardevoir right now? Henry Chow's list looks pretty solid, and Charizard is falling down in popularity. I think Henry Chow got
64.
36.
Yeah.
64. Yeah, okay. So
top 64
solid
somewhere.
weekend for Henry Chow. What do you think about Guardia? I personally don't think it's amazing.
So I played against someone that Henry Chow actually played the same 60 with. I played against a Bond. I believe they were playing actually the exact same 60. They made, I think, only like 2 changes, I think, from the Baltimore deck, and I 2-0'd them pretty convincingly. I don't think that the Terrapagos matchup is necessarily very great. They kind of have to get the Klefki in the active like on the first turn, which I don't think that they were able to do, and I just felt like I kind of just like ran over them. I feel like we finished the set with like 25 minutes remaining or something. It didn't seem like a very like close matchup overall. I think that with Charizard going down, the deck definitely gets slightly better. It's pretty much just like a Turbo Driftloon deck now, I think, like more than anything. And I think that's fine. However, if more people start to add in Vacuum, for like the Raging Bolt matchup, then maybe that kind of starts to collateral Gardevoir as well. So I think it's kind of like the definition of a tier 2 deck. I don't think it's, exceptionally, powerful. It definitely can, win a lot of games. But I think that, the Dusknoir problem still exists. And I think that you have to make your deck, very turbo to like stand a chance like versus like those matchups. And that means then I feel like you're sacrificing a lot of, like I think just like versatility. Like for example, I think the lists are only playing like 1 Monkey Dory now. I think they had to cut down on like a lot of other cards. So like just like so much of your versatility, kind of goes out the window. And you become just kind of like a very linear, I'm just gonna smack you with something like the balloon. Yeah, for as much, or I guess like Screamtail too. But I think it's solid, but it's not exceptional in any way.
Yeah, I think the Dusknoir decks are the bigger problem than the Charizard decks. If for some reason Dusknoir decks fall off, maybe the meta shifts or new cards come out, then I think Gardevoir can come back. But until then, it's going to stay in the binder.
Yeah, Palkia also seems like a really tough matchup for that deck. I could be wrong, but like, they just bomb your board. Yeah, I'm just like they just go like turn 2. Like Radiant Greninja, they pop a Dusknoir as well, and the game's just over. Like they just wipe all of your Ralts off the board. Yeah, like they'll take like 3 or 4 off the field pretty easily on the second, which is super scary.
Yeah. Mohammed wants to know. He's asking about Colress's tenacity in Terrapagos. He says, "Why are we playing it? The other 2 Terrapagos in top 32 ran Energy Lotto." I think we kind of already talked about Energy Lotto and Colress, right?
I don't know. Maybe that was.
Were we talking about that before the pod?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay. My bad. Why don't you walk us through the Lotto Colress debate?
Yeah, so I think that Colress is significantly stronger. I think, getting a guaranteed energy is super nice. Typically, Colress is most powerful on like the second turn of the game. And there were so many situations where I was like, if this was an energy lotto, I wasn't gonna be able to get the knockout because this is a multi-combo deck where like you need so many different pieces. So just like being able to get the stadium is just like so useful. So I think that Colress is probably better just like overall. I don't think I make, top 8 at the tournaments like without it, because there were so many times where like I had just enough cards. I was like, okay, if like I didn't have let's say the stadium in the spot, I would have not gotten the knockout. And it feels like your deck barely gets to the knockouts that it needs to see success. And I think that Colors just helps you so much more. And then I don't necessarily like the lotto in a sense, just because like if you whiff it, then you're just kind of wasted like a Noctowl on just like a completely useless card effectively, right? So I think that's kind of the issue as well. So yeah, I think that Colress is just a lot safer of a card, like in a deck that needs so many pieces to get going. So yeah, I would 100% play that card again. Like there were some times where I was like, dang, like I wish I had a second Colress. like there definitely were like a couple times, but yeah.
Especially when you prize Pidgeot, it's pretty much the only unsearchable card in your deck is double turbo, right? So you need an out, and you don't want your turns to be hint. Like if you ever play a lotto and whiff, I feel like you just immediately lose the game. It's such a tempo deck. Your Pokemon have like no HP. You don't play a lot of disruption. So like if you whiff an attack on a turn, I feel like it just loses you the game a lot. And Tenacity just guarantees those turns.
Yeah.
All right. Thunderdog Pokemon says that we often see decks reemerge after lulls. I guess of them like not being played, referencing Mew, Guardian, Lost Box. Besides people no longer teching, what do you think is the main reason for that? Are the pilots just that amazing, or are these decks retaining viability against common belief?
I think Lost Box is probably the perfect example of that, where like the deck kind of like died of like a couple months and it came back and it's like, hey, I'm still a pretty good deck. I think the number one thing is just people kind of forget about it and people just, stop like really teching for it. I think it's kind of like the Snorlax thing, where like Snorlax sees a ton of success at a tournament, then it, kind of just gets teched out of the format for like a month or two. It's, it doesn't necessarily see a whole lot of success, and then everyone kind of forgets about it, and then it comes back and sees success. So I think that's probably would be my answer. Yeah, it just kind of depends on what people are like preparing for.
Yeah, I think like every tournament the meta shifts a little bit, and it brings opportunities back to old decks, especially after multiple shifts. Like we're in a format where Regidrago is the best and Lost Box is out, right? And then every tournament Drago gets a little less popular until some Lost Box demon, right? Drew Hedrick is like, yo, what if I just brought back my old Lost Box deck right now, right? And I think this happens a lot with people who just like love the archetype, right? Whether it's Lost Box or Snorlax, the people, or like Henry Chow with Gardevoir, right? He brought it back, right? Just because no one else was really trying to make it work. And there's those people who are really dedicated to it. They're looking for those opportunities, and then they get to spike an event when the deck is kind of well positioned.
Yeah. Sometimes the unknown is very powerful in the Pokemon TCG, and I think the perfect example was probably Lost Box this weekend. People were not expecting that deck. I think like some other top groups probably expected the deck to see like some play, but I think like the average person was like, wait, like Lost Zone Toolbox is in top 8, so I think like people become like so like accustomed, and like comfortable with like their beliefs on the format that they're not like willing to change. And I think that that's probably like the reason why like Lost Zone Toolbox saw so much success, is I think like a lot of people kind of had it, I guess, like engraved into their mind that like Regidrago like just destroys Lost Box, and like that's the reason why you shouldn't play it. It's actually the exact same reason I think as to why people were playing Manaphy in situations where like they really shouldn't be, is like people had it like ingrained in their mind for so long, you have to play Manaphy. And I think kind of like as like we got to Worlds, for example, I don't even think like you really like needed the card for that tournament, and like just like so many people just like still had the card because of comfortability, I guess, respects.
Yeah. All right, our last question, or I guess questions. Coffee Dude has asked us a couple. The first question is, do you have things you do the morning of before the tournament begins? Any specific rituals?
So, I don't really have any rituals. I'll say the one thing that I like to do is I like to shower the night before.
Yeah.
It's like the one thing, because like I like to sleep in like as much as I possibly can, and that's just like pretty important, for me. I typically don't eat a lot during the morning time. I know like some people like to, but I definitely can get some like tournament anxiety, and sometimes that on a like that it's like on a full stomach doesn't necessarily feel great sometimes. So maybe some like a Gatorade or like a water or something like that is like usually what I like to do at the beginning of the day. But I think that like everyone's different. Like I'm not gonna tell like someone like what they should be doing. But I think the number one thing to say is, get like a decent amount of sleep. Like heading into Louisville, I like really wanted to make sure that I got like 8 to 9 hours of sleep. And yeah, I guess it worked out like pretty well. And
Yeah.
like there have been like some tournaments. Oh my God, like I'm like so bad at this. But there have been some tournaments where I've gotten like maybe 3.5 hours of sleep or just like 4 hours of sleep. It's just, I don't know.
Jeez, that's not good.
Yeah. It's not great. And just like sometimes my mind is just like racing. And yeah, I kind of forget to sleep. But yeah, please don't do that. Sleep. It's super worth it. I strongly recommend it.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's just always some kind of caffeine. I'm a big coffee drinker, so my hotel has free coffee. I'll get a coffee. Otherwise, I'll just get a Red Bull or whatever before the tournament. Um, maybe listen to some music. Nothing specific, really. The next question is, do you think players have a goal to be on stream? I definitely have a goal to be on stream. I think some people are actually like afraid of being on stream though and don't want to be on stream.
Yeah, I think like one example of that's like Sander Wojcik. I think like because he always plays like these like crazy control decks, and I don't think he likes to be on stream because it exposes his entire deck. I think there was like a rumor that I heard like he was like trying to like stay off stream or something like that, simply because like his decks are like super crazy. But yeah, like being under the spotlight is definitely a very fun thing, but also can be I guess just like kind of challenging as well, because like there's a lot of people who like to call you out for like your misplays and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's kind of I guess like that pressure, but like some people like the pressure too. Yeah.
And some, I don't know. For me, it's just like the pressure doesn't phase me. I've been on stream a lot, and so it's just kind of like just cool.
Yeah. You've been doing this forever though, man. You're a world champion, so just like you are, yes, like you already understand.
Yeah. All right, and our last question is, how many people do you trust with testing and sharing deck lists prior to a tournament?
That is a great question. This is something that I don't think a whole lot of top players really talk about. So I think this is actually probably one of the best questions we've ever gotten. How many people do I trust? Well, I think whoever's in my testing group would probably be like the group of people. I don't think there's like a set like number. But I mean, I would probably say the amount of people who have access, to my exact 60 is probably 10 to 15 people at most. That's pretty much it, I would say.
Yeah, I'm honestly pretty open. I think for like ICs and Worlds, I'm more closed off. Like I think at Worlds, the number of people that had my 60 was probably like 4 or 5. Whereas regionals, it's probably like 15.
Same thing applies for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think other people are kind of the same, especially like internationals as well tend to be a little more closed off. It's always funny to me, like going to internationals and like you run into someone and it's like kind of the natural question is like, oh, what are you playing this weekend? But it's just like at internationals, nobody wants to talk about it. Whereas like at regionals, like, you run into Rahul, you're like, yo, what's up, Rahul? What's your Lugia list looking like? And he's like, yeah, same 60, of course, man. Whereas, you run into him at LAIC and he might be like, oh, I don't know, man, I might not be playing Lugia. It's like, okay, like you're playing Lugia.
Yeah. Like I think on my Patreon, I made it pretty clear that like Terrapagos like was the deck that I was going to play, but that's also just because like regionals are, I would say for the majority of testing groups, a lot more, I wouldn't say like casual, but I think like the stakes are like definitely significantly lower. So
yeah, I think it's a little more casual.
Yeah.
I also think like the tournaments are so big that it doesn't really matter. And especially like when we're producing content, right? We want to be authentic. We want to make sure like the decks we're promoting
my camera died. It's okay. You can keep going.
Just keep going. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
100%. Let's go.
Yeah, like when we're making content, we want to be authentic, right? So it's like if we want to be making content, it's hard not to have people know like what we're playing, right? So I think for us, maybe the number of people who had our list is higher than others. Like for this tournament, I put out a Terapagos masterclass, and I think the list that I like recommended at the start of the class was actually maybe the exact list that we played, or maybe a card or two off. But so I guess the number of people that had access to our list for this one was like probably way higher. Like there was probably like 100 people with access to that list. So I think that contributes as well for us.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's true. I think that like I'm also pretty open. Like if I think a deck is the strongest deck in the format, I'm gonna be like relatively open. Like I said, I think on like the DDG podcast that I thought that like Terapagos was like overall the strongest deck in the format. And I thought like the matchup spread was pretty insane with the deck, and so I think that's definitely top players are a lot more open about just like regionals for sure. Yeah, because I mean like there's only like 3 ICs per year, and then World is only once per year as well. So like, when it comes to regionals, there's like I think if you combine every region, it's like over 20. So
yeah. And it's also not new format as well, I think also contributes to that kind of like protection of information, right? Like if you have a cool deck, then you care a bit more, where it's like, when I'm playing Charizard for the millionth time or Gardevoir for the millionth time, it's like, okay, this isn't really secret information anyways. And I think that also contributes to the amount of people that know what you're playing. All right, so I think that's going to wrap up our 4th episode of the Ace Trainer podcast. I had a lot of fun. Always love to yap with you, Gabe, about whatever Pokemon content we have to yap about. So I hope our viewers enjoyed and learned something. Anything else to say?
Best of luck to everyone going to Lille this weekend. I think the meta should be pretty much exactly the same. I don't expect like any I guess like major changes from Louisville. I think that like Bolt will probably stay as like the most or like second most popular deck in the formats. So pretty much expect a very similar formats like to the regional this weekend. So yeah, that was it.
All right, see you guys in the next episode. So.